Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Aslanov and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Ukrainian, Russian and US delegations meet in Geneva as President Volodymyr Zelensky warns of possible new Russian attacks. At least 3 people dead and 3 critically injured in Rhode Island high school hockey game shooting. And ahead of US-Iran nuclear talks in Geneva, President Donald Trump says he will be involved indirectly. Fresh round of 2 days peace talks on Ukraine started in Geneva on Tuesday, bringing together Russia, Ukraine and the United States delegations. The Kremlin says not to expect any news today from the Ukraine peace talks in Geneva, as they are being held behind closed doors. They also stated the negotiations will continue until tomorrow and will focus on land disputes, the main sticking point in the conflict. US President Donald Trump is pressing both sides to reach a deal to end Europe's largest war since 1945. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that Ukrainian intelligence indicates that further Russian attacks on energy targets were likely. He warned that this would make it more difficult to reach an agreement to end the nearly 4-year war. However, US President Donald Trump said peace talks will be very easy. Speaking in his nightly video address on the eve of the new talks in Geneva with Russian and US officials, Zelensky said Moscow's attacks were evolving and involved a combination of weapons and required specialized air defenses.
Everything we discussed with partners in Munich must be implemented promptly. It is important that partners do not remain silent. Everyone is now awaiting the continuation of trilateral meetings. Our delegation is already in Geneva and preparing for negotiations. Russia cannot resist the temptation of the final days of winter cold and wants to strike Ukrainians painfully. The more evil comes from Russia, the harder it will be to reach any agreements with them. Partners must understand this. First and foremost, this concerns the United States. Soon we will mark a year of Ukraine's most active diplomacy. We agreed to all realistic proposals from America, starting with the proposal for an unconditional and long-term ceasefire. Russia rejects this, continues assaults at the front, and strikes on our cities and energy infrastructure. We expect partners to act so that forcing the aggressor to peace truly works.
Ukraine talks tomorrow as well in Geneva with Witkoff and Jared Kushner. What are you expecting there? Is there
big talks? It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you. We are in a position, we want them to come in.
Britain should accelerate its defense spending, Prime Minister Keir Starmer said on Monday, as Westminster considers bringing forward a target to spend 3% of GDP on defense. The comments come amid warnings about the threat posed by Russia and growing pressure on the government's finances. For more, we go to Zainab Farizada in Manchester.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said Britain must move faster on defense spending, signaling a possible shift in the government's military funding plans. Speaking to reporters on Monday, Starmer said the country needed to step up and accelerate defense investment, adding that the issue goes beyond how much money is spent. Westminster previously committed to raising defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, with a longer-term ambition to reach 3% in the next parliament, expected after the 2029 election. But new reporters say the government is now considering bringing that target forward. The government has cited security risks, including those linked to Russia, as part of its defense planning. However, the increase comes as Britain faces pressure on public finances. Last year, the government reduced its international aid budget to help fund the rise in defense spending. Britain's budget watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, has estimated that increasing defense spending to 3% of GDP would cost an additional £17 £0.3 billion a year by 2029 to 2030. Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has also struggled to keep public finances on track, and the Treasury is cautious about accelerating defence spending further. A government spokesperson declined to comment on any revised plans, saying Britain is delivering the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War. No decision has yet been announced on bringing forward the 3% target. Zainab Farizadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
A high school ice hockey game in Rhode Island tragically ended with at least 3 people dead on Monday. It's after a shooting incident which authorities believe stemmed from a family dispute. Authorities now say they have identified the suspect.
At least 3 people have died and 3 others left in critical condition following a mass shooting at a high school ice hockey game in Rhode Island on Monday. The incident occurred at Lynch Arena in Pawtucket, an indoor skating rink. Authorities said they have identified the suspect, who also died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound, and described the shooting as a targeted incident linked to a family dispute.
So what I can say right now that we have identified the person, the suspect, by a birth name. The birth name was Robert Dorgan. We have also learned that the person does go by the name of Roberta, also uses a last name of Esposito. But again, that will be all confirmed throughout the course of the investigation as to their status. That really doesn't have anything to do with the investigation.
Local media reported that the gunman, identified as the father of a North Providence High School senior, shot 5 members of the student's family. According to the reports, the student's mother was killed at the rink and a sibling later died in hospital. Eyewitnesses described scenes of panic, which involved around 13 shots being fired in rapid succession over 6 seconds, prompting spectators and student athletes to drop to the floor for cover.
Many were hugging their parents, rightfully so, and you could see some of the parents watching the players kind of roam and could feel and ask them, how are you doing? And you could see the tears starting to come down, and the parents hugging their kids. And I'm sure they're thanking God that they weren't the victim of the shooting and they're still alive with them today.
In a post on social media, FBI Director Kash Patel said agents had been deployed to assist with the investigation. Pawtucket, located just north of Providence near the Massachusetts state border, has a population of around 75,000 and is the 4th largest city in Rhode Island. The shooting comes roughly 2 months after a separate attack at Brown University, a few miles south of Pawtucket, in which 2 students were killed, 9 others wounded, and a days-long manhunt launched across the state.
As U.S. and Iranian officials prepare for critical nuclear talks in Geneva, President Donald Trump says he will be involved indirectly and believes Tehran wants a deal. Meanwhile, new satellite images and Iran's fresh military drills are raising the stakes in an already tense standoff. Here is more.
Ahead of the US and Iranian officials meeting in Switzerland for a second round of talks on Tuesday over Tehran's nuclear program, President Donald Trump says that he will be involved indirectly in the high-stakes discussions. He believes Iran is willing to make a deal.
No, I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. But typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators, because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with the United Nations nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi on Monday, and he said in a post on X that he was in Geneva to achieve a fair and equitable deal. Meanwhile, satellite imagery has confirmed that the US aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln is operating near Iran. According to the BBC, the carrier is positioned off the coast of Oman, about 700 kilometers from Iranian shores. The Navy ship was deployed to the Gulf region in late January, but hadn't appeared in satellite images until now. Washington has also ordered a second carrier strike group to the Middle East. Additional US warships and aircraft are already in the region. However, on Monday, Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy carried out military drills in the Strait of Hormuz. State-linked media said the exercise tested readiness against possible security threats. Tehran has repeatedly warned that it might shut the Strait of Hormuz in retaliation for an attack. The narrow waterway handles about 1/5 of the world's oil exports, and closing it would sharply reduce supply and push oil prices much higher. Over in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said any US deal with Iran must fully dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure, not just limit uranium enrichment.
Indirect nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran are underway in Geneva. In Tehran, residents say they hope the talks will reduce tensions and prevent a regional war.
Residents in Tehran say they are hoping diplomacy will prevail as indirect negotiations between Washington and Tehran begin in Geneva. The talks aim to address the long-running nuclear dispute between the two sides. They come at a tense moment, with the United States increasing its military presence in the region and little public sign of compromise from either side.
I believe the negotiations will go well because the pressure from neighboring countries will likely prevent this war from happening. Based on what we know of Trump's personality, it is clear that he pursues his own interests. So I think war is unlikely. We hope there will be no war, because if conflict does occur, it will bring nothing good for the people. It would be a challenge for the entire region.
Others point to regional politics as a key factor, arguing that Israel's position could complicate progress.
One of the main obstacles is Israel, which is preventing these negotiations from coming to fruition. We hope for a positive outcome. We are optimistic and have always been optimistic. We hope that this negotiation will be in the interest of the people and that there will be no war.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said he will be involved indirectly in the Geneva discussions and believes Tehran wants to reach an agreement.
French President Emmanuel Macron has met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Mumbai to strengthen ties between the two nations. During the talks, the leaders signed an agreement to avoid double taxation and discuss cooperation on innovation, artificial intelligence and economic partnerships. France has been a major supplier of military equipment to India, and the discussions come after India approved a $40 billion boost to its armed forces, including the purchase of more French-made Rafale jets. China has ushered in the Lunar New Year with its annual Spring Festival Gala, a globally watched television event blending tradition with cutting-edge technology. Festivities were also held across Asia and beyond, including in Manila's historic Chinatown, where large crowds marked the occasion as Beijing signaled openness to renewed talks with the Philippines over the South China Sea.
China has welcomed the Year of the Fire Horse with a spectacular Spring Festival Gala. The 4-hour show themed The Steed Gallops, Momentum Unstoppable. This year's gala blended traditional culture with modern innovation, weaving the spirit of the horse, symbolizing perseverance and self-improvement throughout the performances. Audiences were treated to stirring songs, elaborate dance routines, opera, comedy sketches and magic acts, alongside high-tech elements including AI-driven stage effects and even AI-embodied robots performing a dynamic kung fu routine. The Spring Festival Gala, first broadcast in 1983 and recognised by Guinness World Records as the world's most watched annual television programme, remains a centrepiece of Lunar New Year celebrations. The festival itself was inscribed on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in December 2024. Celebrations extended far beyond mainland China. In Manila, tens of thousands of people flocked to Binondo, widely regarded as the world's oldest Chinatown, to usher in the Year of the Fire Horse. Fireworks painted the night sky in shifting colours as families visited temples, exchanged red envelopes and watched traditional lion dances, and similar scenes played out across Asia and in Chinese communities worldwide.
Heavy snowfall has caused a disruption at the Winter Olympics in Livigno, northern Italy. Organizers cancelled the women's snowboard slopestyle medal event and delayed the freestyle skiing aerials qualifying round. Officials are monitoring conditions to see if the snow will clear enough for aerials to go ahead. Staff have been clearing the steep jumps with shovels as temperatures remain around -60 degrees Celsius. 2 days of heavy snow have covered the village and venues, creating a winter wonderland, but making the slopes tricky for athletes. Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss the high-stakes US-mediated peace talks in Geneva on ending the war in Ukraine. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. A critical round of US-mediated peace talks is underway in Geneva, where delegations from Russia, Ukraine and the United States have gathered for 2 days of negotiations aimed at ending the nearly 4-year war in Ukraine. This marks the third major trilateral meeting this year, after 2 prior rounds in Abu Dhabi that failed to break the deadlock. The negotiations come amid intense U.S. pressure on Ukraine to reach a deal, even as Kiev rejects demands to cede territory, particularly the remainder of the Donetsk region that Moscow still fails to control. With expectations low and both sides far apart, the world watches to see if this round in Geneva can produce a breakthrough. Now we're joined from Chicago, USA by Maria Dmitriev-Kapenyak, medical doctor and president of the Ukrainian Congress Committee, Illinois Division. Maria, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So what's your assessment of the Geneva talks which kicked off today, and especially after 2 prior rounds failed to yield meaningful progress?
Yes, everyone agrees that unfortunately the stakes are high, but the expectations for meaningful results are pretty low, especially as Ukraine is being pressured into territorial concessions. As we know, and history teaches us, seizing territories is not a way to stop aggression. That has happened back in 1939, I believe, when Hitler was giving peace of Czechoslovakia. Obviously, it did not prevent the Second World War. So everyone understands that if Putin seizes territories, it's only going to be a stepping stone for attacking Europe. And as I was watching your news earlier today, Russia continues to threaten NATO, Russia continues to threaten the United States. And as United States and the United Kingdom, but also we hear a lot that United States is also concerned about Russian threats in Arctic, especially around Greenland. Well, if that is the case, the best way to defeat and weaken Russia would be in Ukraine.
So we've seen increased U.S. pressure on Ukraine to swiftly reach a deal. How do you view the role of the United States in those negotiations?
United States could be really that deterring force. The United States has the most power to project strength on Russia, and yet it is not being done. There are several bills right now in Congress and Senate of the United States that are yet to be passed on stronger sanctions on Russian oil. That is at least a minimum that United States could do swiftly. And also, of course, United States would help NATO and provide Ukraine with at least air defense. As we know, United States is not providing anything that is funded by United States taxpayers. Those weapons, those air defense missiles are being purchased under Pearl Agreement. So this could be increased. The Ukraine needs more arms and more air defense, especially air defense, because this year or last year, 2025, was the year with the most civilian death in Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. And that is because Russia is constantly bombarding Ukrainian civilians and cities. So United States could be crucial in providing air defense and pressuring Russia. In fact, looks like only United States could do this at this point. And yet there is reluctance, and it is hard to understand where it is coming from. Putin is not a partner for anyone. Putin is an adversary, and emboldening him, encouraging this aggression is going to take the war farther into Europe.
Dr. Dmitry Kapeniak, how credible do you think Moscow's stated intentions are to pursue a diplomatic end to the war, given recent military actions?
It is not credible. Russia has signed many agreements and didn't honor any. And this brings me back to Budapest Memorandum, when Russia was the one of the parties that signed agreement between United States, United Kingdom, and Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons for the security guarantees. And this is one of the key words that being floated around in these negotiations all along, security guarantees. What are security guarantees? Can Russia guarantee securities? They've done it once, and then they invaded the country that they offered the guarantees of security. So that just tells you that the security guarantees have to be binding, and especially coming from the United States. Mm-hmm. So the guarantees that are binding, that are law of the land, that will survive presidential elections and will survive all the election cycles, Democrats or Republican in power, that would be the only meaningful security guarantees that Putin and the rest of the world would abide by.
So, territorial integrity versus peace. Is there a realistic path where Ukraine can ensure both?
Probably not, because giving up territories is not going to appease any aggressor. Again, back to history lessons, back to anywhere in the world, when one country invades the other, you don't give up that country, because the country that's next to that country is going to be next. In fact, it's only going to be, not just in Ukraine, it's going to embolden people everywhere, and that is already happening. Amassing weapons, everyone is investing in defense right now, instead of investing in the people and economy, into the growth of economic powers. Countries are investing in defense and weapons. We hear talks about Poland wanting to have their nuclear weapons, and that is very rightful, as they would be next in line to be threatened by Russia and its nuclear potential. So giving up territories would only be a next step to the future aggressions, and everyone understands it at this point. That is why Russia is threatening the whole world, far beyond the Ukraine borders.
But how do ordinary Ukrainians view territorial concessions issue?
Listen, its territories are people. So giving up territories would be subjecting our people that were born and lived on those lands into occupation. And Russian occupation is basically equal genocide that has happened back when Soviet Union occupied Ukraine. If you know, the Holodomor happened, which is death by starvation. Right now, people on the occupied territories, like Kherson, Zaporizhia, they're being kidnapped, threatened, thrown into mass graves. They're being forced to receive Russian passports. In fact, you cannot even receive medical care if you don't have a Russian passport on the occupied territories. Kids are Russified, kids are sent to military camps, kidnapped, abducted. So that's what territorial concessions mean, subjecting people that are native to those lands into modern day slavery and torture.
So Ukraine still experiences active Russian strikes during negotiations. Does ongoing fighting undermine diplomacy, or does it strengthen Ukraine's negotiating hand?
Obviously, bombarding civilians is not strengthening anything. In fact, it's showing how Russia is not committed to peace by bullying the whole negotiation process while people are thinking how to end this war in a just way. Civilians, hospitals, maternity wards are attacked by Russia. So that just shows you how much Russia cares about peace and how much Russia cares about human life and everything that humanitarian approach would provide.
Dr. Dmitry Kapeniak, what specific support do Ukrainian civil society and diasporas see as most urgent from Western countries right now?
Air defense and pressuring Russia into conceding, into meaningful negotiations, into something that would really stop the war, like security guarantees that I mentioned earlier, which would be the law of the land. So that is exactly what diaspora is working for, working on right now with our elected officials. We're trying to start, because it's not even on the table right now in the Senate or Congress, any law, any resolution that would be voted and last for centuries after new election cycles that would enforce this peace. So that is priority number one: oil, sanctioning oil and hunting down the shadow fleet, which weakens Russia, also is a big priority. But really keeping Ukraine in the news, because as you mentioned, this is the year 4, going on year 5, soon after a week. And of course, the public interest kind of goes somewhere else. And this is important to know, that the war is as cruel as in the beginning, and civilians are dying at the mass numbers. And this is not just a threat for the Ukraine, and it's not just existential war for Ukrainian people. It is for the security of the whole world, because every dictator takes a page of Putin's book, because Putin is allowed to still threaten the world. So it takes collective actions here in the United States, but also in the world.
Dr. Maria Dmitriev Kapeniak, thank you for your insights and for joining us on this critical and complex subject. We appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks a lot. Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Iranian authorities say they have rescued hundreds of Afghan migrants who were stranded in freezing conditions near the border, highlighting the dangers faced by people attempting irregular journeys through the region. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has the details from Kabul.
Iran's state news agency IRNA reports that around 300 undocumented Afghan migrants were rescued in the border district of Atayabad in northern eastern Razavi Khorasan province. Local officials said the group had become trapped in rain, cold temperature and harsh winter conditions while attempting to move through difficult border routes. Authorities say those rescued were taken to designated centers where they received warm food, temporary shelter and medical assistance. Officials added that several people were suffering from cold-related illnesses and frostbite and were treated on site. According to the report, after receiving assistance and completing legal procedures, the migrants were expected to be handed over to Afghan authorities. Tayabad, which lies along the Iran-Afghanistan border, is considered one of the main crossing points used by undocumented migrants. Many Afghan attempting to reach Europe travel through Iran and then Turkey, often relying on irregular routes and smugglers, and frequently without valid travel documents. The incident underscores the risks migrants face during winter months, as freezing temperatures and difficult terrain continue to pose life-threatening dangers along key migrant corridors. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy held a drill in the Hormuz Strait on Monday, a day prior to renewed Iran-US nuclear negotiations. Our correspondent reports from Tehran.
The Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, staged a combined war game codenamed Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, in one of the world's most critical energy checkpoints. The Strait of Hormuz, where the drill is held, is a narrow maritime corridor through which a major share of global oil exports transit. Led by IRGC's top commander, Major General Mohammad Pakpour, objectives of the drill include assessing combat readiness of naval units, reviewing contingency and security plans, and rehearsing counter-response. The drills started one day ahead of indirect nuclear negotiations with the U.S. on Tuesday in Geneva. Earlier, Secretary of Supreme National Security Council Ali Larijani said that Iran does not seek war, but it will not bow to U.S. threats, relying on a combination of negotiations and deterrence. In an interview, Larijani said that Iran will target U.S. bases in the region if it is attacked, stressing that Tehran's ballistic missiles capability is not on the agenda of nuclear talks in Geneva. According to Iran's security chief, U.S. demand of zero enrichment makes no sense. Tehran says its nuclear program is solely for civilian purposes and is ready to assuage concerns regarding nuclear weapons by building trust that enrichment is and will stay for peaceful purposes. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Monday met Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency in Geneva, to discuss cooperation with the IAEA and technical aspects of the impending talks with the United States. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
The Baku Military Court has concluded a high-profile trial sentencing Ruben Vardanyan to 20 years in prison for multiple serious offenses committed during the conflict period.
A court in Baku has delivered a verdict in the high-profile case against Armenian citizen Ruben Vardanyan. The Baku Military Court sentenced him to 20 years in prison after finding him guilty on multiple serious charges.
Vardanyan was convicted under several articles of Azerbaijan's criminal code, including crimes against peace and humanity, war crimes, terrorism, and financing terrorism. The trial, which lasted over a year, was conducted openly and according to legal procedures. The defendant was provided with a Russian-language interpreter and state-funded legal counsel. His proceedings were handled separately from other trials related to the conflict and included over 400 volumes of evidence. Prosecutors had sought a life sentence, citing the severity and scope of the crimes. Ruben Vardanyan is a former citizen of the Russian Federation and a prominent figure in the post-Soviet business world. He co-founded the investment firm Troika Dialog and served on the boards of major Russian corporations. Forbes previously estimated his net worth at $1.2 billion. While Vardanyan built a public image as a philanthropist and modernizer, his business activities have faced international scrutiny. Investigations, including the 2019 OCCRP report Troika Laundromat, linked him to a network of offshore companies through which billions of dollars flowed during his tenure at Troika Dialog. Earlier, ANU's investigations premiered the documentary The Oligarch's Design, which traces Ruben Vardanyan's rise from Moscow's financial elite to political influence in the region. Drawing on expert analysis and open source data, the film highlights how Vardanyan leveraged wealth and opaque networks to extend his power beyond formal politics. The Baku Military Court emphasized that the verdict was the result of a legal process conducted according to the law. The ruling holds Vardanyan accountable for crimes committed during the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, concluding a thorough judicial review.
Talks between the Slovak and Georgian foreign ministers concluded with the announcement that the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico intends to visit Tbilisi in the near future. He's expected to be joined by the Speaker of the Slovak Parliament as the two countries aim to boost economic cooperation. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more details from Tbilisi.
between Slovak Foreign Minister Žuroš Blanner and Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bačarashvili were described as smooth and without disputes, concluding with the announcement that the Speaker of the Slovak Parliament and Prime Minister Robert Fico are expected to visit Tbilisi in the near future. The planned visits indicate an intention to intensify political dialogue and economic cooperation. A central issue during the press conference was the possibility of EU sanctions targeting Georgia's Ulevi oil terminal, a key Black Sea export hub within the Middle Corridor, the Trans-Caspian trade route linking China and Central Asia to Europe via the South Caucasus, bypassing Russia. The port has been referenced in discussions in Brussels over concerns about potential sanctions circumvention involving Russia. Slovakia publicly opposed the idea of placing the Ulevi facility on a sanctions list, with Blanner stating that he sees no justification for such a move. This position sets Slovakia apart from more hardline voices within the EU advocating stricter scrutiny of third countries amid the bloc's broader sanctions regime against Moscow. While Hungary has frequently challenged consensus on sanctions policy, Slovakia's clear stance on Georgia adds another dimension to internal EU debates about proportionality, evidence standards, and the political consequences of punitive measures toward candidate countries. Beyond sanctions, the ministers also discussed Georgia's EU accession path, regional security issues, and economic cooperation. Slovakia emphasized the importance of maintaining dialogue between Brussels and Tbilisi, while Georgia pointed to the need for stability and predictable relations during its integration process. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A Middle Eastern consortium has unveiled a $700 million plan to build a new high-capacity data corridor running through Iraq. Adam Morrow has more from Istanbul.
A consortium of 3 Middle Eastern technology companies has unveiled plans for a major data connectivity project designed to link the United Arab Emirates to Turkey through Iraq. The $700 million initiative, known as WorldLink, would position Turkey as a strategic transit hub for digital traffic moving between Asia and Europe. Under the plan, an undersea data cable would run from the UAE to Iraq's Fao Peninsula, before continuing northward through a terrestrial network into Turkey. Project managers say the proposed route is intended to provide an alternative to existing pathways that pass through the Suez Canal, helping to reduce congestion and shorten transmission times. According to officials involved, the WorldLink system will be privately funded and rolled out in phases over the next 5 years. The project comes amid surging global demand for faster and more reliable data connections, driven by the rapid expansion of AI technologies, cloud computing, and cross-border digital services. Industry analysts say high-capacity data infrastructure is increasingly critical to supporting AI operations, financial transactions, and large-scale data transfers. The initiative's backers say the project will improve regional connectivity, increase network resilience, and boost Turkey's appeal as a destination for technology and data center investment. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll examine President Sadir Japarov's power consolidation in Kyrgyzstan and its implications for political stability. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Now we turn to Kyrgyzstan, where President Sadir Japarov has moved decisively to consolidate power following the sudden dismissal of his longtime ally Kamychbek Tashev, the influential head of the State Committee for National Security. The move comes amid growing debate over early presidential elections and sweeping reforms to the country's security architecture, changes that significantly expand presidential control and narrow the role of the powerful security services. With Kyrgyzstan's history of elite splits and street protests, this political rupture raises serious questions about stability, succession, and the future balance of power in Bishkek. To unpack these developments and their wider implications, I'm joined now by Zanat Maminkulov, senior lecturer at Eurasian National University, speaking to us from Astana. Mr. Maminkulov, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Hi there, thank you for inviting.
So, Mr. Maminkulov, how significant is Kamchibek Tashiyev's dismissal in the context of Kyrgyzstan's political system, which has long relied on strong informal alliances?
So this news came as a surprising, because Tashiyev and Japarov, they were closely acting friends. So Tashiyev was known for his ruthless character, ambitions, and influence. So in the local Kyrgyz context, it signals a competition for power, serious rupture between the two long-standing allies, and this could exacerbate existing South-North political sensitivities in the country. So in short, Japarov just removed Tashiyev as a rival for power for the next future.
So, from your perspective, was this move more about preventing elite rivalry or preempting a potential political challenge ahead of elections?
So I tend to think that the official explanation made by Japarov that internal divisions inside the state apparatus pose a real risk is pragmatic and close to the reality. So it reflects concerns about elite rivalry, which might be destabilizing rather than merely information games.
So what does the restructuring of the State Committee for National Security tell us about President Japarov's governing style?
So Japarov is clearly consolidating his power and forming a new circle of loyal security personnel and bodies, which's goal is to minimize any risk of potential coup d'etat scenarios in the future. This reflects a centralized and security-focused governing approach.
Mr. Maminkulov, how unusual is it in Central Asian terms to so sharply curtail the power of a security chief once considered a political co-equal?
Such moves are not common, but not unprecedented. For example, in Uzbekistan, when President Mirziyoyev came to power, he removed powerful security chief Inoyatov early in his tenure. And in Kazakhstan, former security boss Masimov was arrested after the 2022 unrest. However, in Kyrgyzstan's more competitive and sensitive political environment, such a split between co-equals is particularly striking.
So could separating the border service and creating a presidentially controlled state protection service improve governance, or does it risk further power centralization?
So formally, such restructuring or reshuffle could streamline responsibilities, and they will divide powers between these security bodies. And if these bodies are directly subordinated to the president, it clearly increases centralization. So in Kyrgyz political realities, loyalty can shift quickly, so long-term stability is never guaranteed.
So Tashiyev played a key role in anti-corruption campaigns. How might his removal affect public perceptions of those efforts?
So he was widely seen as a champion of restoring order, especially in high-profile anti-corruption cases. So his removal may lead some people to question the continuity of these campaigns, potentially weakening public trust in an anti-corruption drive.
Mr. Maminkulov, survey data show Tashiyev's approval rating rising while Japarov's remains stable. How important are popularity trends in Kyrgyz elite politics?
So popularity is highly significant in Kyrgyzstan, where politics is made on the streets, and the politics is more competitive and populist and socially sensitive than in other Central Asian or post-Soviet countries. So Tashiyev's strong support, particularly in the south of the country, could have translated into real electoral leverage, making approval ratings politically consequential.
Kyrgyzstan has experienced 3 revolutions since 2005. Does this split increase the risk of renewed political unrest?
At this stage, I think I don't see an immediate risk of unrest. Japarov is likely to focus on electoral legitimacy in the coming years, next year. However, if Tashiyev's camp consolidates around a strong alternative candidate or Tashiyev himself, political tensions could intensify.
Mr. Maminkulov, how are regional actors, Russia, China, and neighboring Central Asian states likely to view this consolidation of power?
For now, regional actors are likely to prioritize stability and may quietly support Japarov's consolidation efforts. Tokayev just talked to Japarov today. Russia, China, and neighboring states value predictability, stability in Kyrgyzstan, given shared interest in logistics, energy corridors, the Kambarata projects, the China, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan railway projects, and regional security cooperation.
Zanat Maminkulov, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your valuable insights with us. We truly appreciate your joining us from Astana to help shed light on these critical developments in Kyrgyzstan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates. Thank you for watching.